Much for joining us today and for everything you do across every mode. I want to recognize former NTSB Chair Sumwalt for joining us today. Thank you for returning. This is an all-hands-on-deck effort, so we're glad you're part of this. All right. And I want to thank everybody who's here and participating across the public sector, industry, labor, all of our stakeholders, because we are dedicated to the common goal that is bringing us together at this summit, which is, of course, strengthening safety. America has the safest, most complex system in the world because of the work you all do and because of the standards we all hold ourselves to. We never settle, and when we see an issue, we move swiftly, and we find ways to move together. That's why we've asked everybody to come here today. And while the data are clear that U.S. aviation remains an exceptionally safe mode of travel, whether you compare it to other modes, whether you compare it to other places, or whether you compare it to other times in our own history, we take nothing for granted. And we are particularly concerned because we have seen an uptick in serious close calls that we must address together. Initial information suggests that more mistakes than usual are happening across the system, on runways, at gates when planes are pushing back, in control towers, and on flight decks. So today is about the entire system, which means it's about all of us. This is a key priority for the FAA, for the entire department, and for the Biden-Harris administration. I know it is for everybody who is gathered here. And that's why we're not going to rest easy with past success. We're going to consistently look for ways to enhance safety, including efforts that we already have underway, like rolling out the ASDEX taxiway arrival prediction features, modernizing airport infrastructure, moving forward with airport safety management system rules, and more. I don't need to tell anyone here why all of this matters so much. The compelling advocacy of families like those who lost loved ones in 2009 on Continental Flight 3407, in 2018 on Lion Air Flight 610, and in 2019 on Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302, must remind us of what is at stake and continue to guide our critical safety mission. As we look at the recent incidents of the last year or so, and as NTSB and FAA continue to investigate, we can't wait for the next catastrophic event to seek the warning signs of today, fully determine the contributing factors, and swiftly address them. We're staying vigilant because we know that as long as technology and people and society continue to change, which is to say, in perpetuity, we need our safety systems and our safety culture to evolve and adapt to those changes. And as you're all taking on this important assignment, I hope that you'll remember our predecessors who came together to overhaul and enhance aviation safety culture and systems in the late 1990s. By the very nature of safety work, we will never know the names of all the people who are going about their lives today because of accidents and crashes that did not happen, thanks to aviation leaders who knew that the safety record of their day was not good enough. And of course, those who did that work before today were working from a very different starting point. But as we do our work in our time, we are going to reflect that same spirit of collaboration in service of a shared goal, which has been the foundation of this sector's safety record for decades. So today and in the weeks to come, we ask you to help us address a number of questions. What is showing in the data and what is missing in the data? What are the root causes of the incidents that we've seen? What's working well that we need to remember and continue, maintain, and reinforce? And at the same time, what are the new steps that need to be taken? What roles and responsibilities do we each have in making needed changes? As our aviation system evolves, are our current systems adequate for the most important part of the aviation system, which is our people, and what needs to be adapted or enhanced? And beyond aviation, can we learn from other high-stakes industries whose workforces have also gone through dramatic changes during the pandemic? So today's summit is going to be the first in a series of coordinated events and actions, all part of the call to action that we put out last month. That includes an aviation safety info share meeting at the end of the month and a CAST meeting on April 6th, all of which will inform the work of our new safety review team. Aviation has to be about safety first and moving people and goods within that safety first framework. That's how we keep U.S. aviation's place as the safest, most complex system in the world. And it's how we maintain this extraordinary fact, which is that a mode of transportation that consists of propelling millions of passengers, dozens or hundreds at a time, through the skies in a metal tube at nearly the speed of sound several miles above the earth is also somehow the safest mode of transportation that we know. That is what we marvel at, but also what we dare not take for granted. And that is our mission. I have no doubt that we will succeed in meeting that mission with your help. So I want to thank you for the active service that is convening here and everything we're going to do to follow up on it. And I look forward to engaging with you today and in the weeks and months and years ahead. Thank you very much, and let's get to work.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Secretary Buttigieg, for not only for your interest, but for your leadership. And thanks to all of you for being here. I am pleased to see so many familiar faces in the audience and to know that you are taking time to join us today for this safety summit. When I called this gathering several weeks ago, it was because we had seen, as the Secretary mentioned, an uptick in incidents across the aviation system. In the intervening time, we've experienced additional incidents, including events on runways, terminal ramp areas, and even unruly passenger incidents that continue to defy logic. I think I speak for all of us when I say that, and certainly the traveling public, that these events are concerning. They are not what we've come to expect during a time of unprecedented safety in the U.S. air transportation system. Check. The question is, what do they mean? Many years ago, while I was learning to fly, one of the first lessons my first instructor taught me was to listen to the aircraft. What's it telling you? That was a very important lesson that had stood with me throughout my entire career. And today, that's what we're here to find out. What is the system telling us? As a safety community, we must pay attention to the events of recent months and what the system is trying to tell us. I'm honored to be joined in this plenary session by former National Transportation Safety Board Chair Robert Zumwalt, who will help us facilitate a conversation among our panelists that I will hope will help us frame our thinking. This plenary session will be followed by some specific breakout sessions designed to allow our various stakeholders to dive deeper into specific areas and have frank, open discussion. One of the hallmarks of aviation and people who pursue a life in this industry is a willingness to question conventional wisdom and to always be looking to advance safety. As I mentioned in my call to action, the biggest mistake we can make as an industry is to become complacent. As a safety professional, if you're comfortable, it probably means you're missing something. In that light, my colleagues at the FAA and I have brought all of us here together today. There's no question that aviation is amazingly safe, but vigilance can never take a day off. We must ask ourselves difficult questions and sometimes even uncomfortable ones, even when we are confident that our system is sound. For example, we recognize the desire to make maximum use of available runway and airspace capacity to keep the aviation system running smoothly and on time. In light of these recent close calls and the attention being focused on even the most routine of go-arounds, are we emphasizing efficiency over safety? How much of what we see can be attributed to the sudden resurgence in demand following the pandemic? Since 1997, the aviation industry has made enormous strides in improving safety under the guidance of the Commercial Aviation Safety Team, or CAST. As you know, the data sharing and voluntary safety reporting systems under the CAST umbrella enabled us to reduce the risk of a fatal accident by 95%. Instead of reacting to accidents and incidents after the fact, we're getting better at scouring the data for precursors that allow us to identify a nascent event before it manifests itself as something more serious. That's an amazing accomplishment. And I believe that historians will look at the strides we've made under CAST as one of the greatest successes of the modern transportation age. But we must also ask ourselves if the CAST process is nimble enough to help us reach the goal of eliminating the rare but still concerning incidents we've seen recently. I want to say before we get started with our plenary panel that I appreciate the messages of support and the pledges of cooperation that I've gotten from many of you in this room today. America's aviation safety net is strong. Our goal, our obligation, is to sew those threads even tighter. I want to encourage you to come into these sessions with an open mind. And as I mentioned in the call to action, I want to hear from our stakeholders about to echo the Secretary's message about concrete steps that we can take in the near and midterm to make the world's safest transportation system even safer. Before we get started, I want to take a moment and acknowledge our current Safety Board Chair, Chair Hamidi, who has joined us today. And I know, as we all know, the NTSB is taking its own independent look into many of these same issues, and we are appreciative of all the work that Chair Hamidi and her incredible team does. And so with that, I'd like to ask Chair Hamidi up to have a few words before we get started with our panel.
Took me a while. So I had foot surgery. Have you seen Brad here? So Brad and I have matching knee rollers. They're up in front on the stage. If you'll notice, mine is my right foot, his is his left. So we did tussle over a recommendation issued by the NTSB. We'll talk about it later. No, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I could call you Acting Administrator Nolan, but I think Billy Jennifer is probably most appropriate, and I really appreciate all your dedication to safety, and the secretaries, of course, and Brad, yours, and blame Robert, he trained me. I don't know what to tell you. So with that, I do think the U.S. has a lot to be proud of. And I'm going to adjust this because I think it's probably a little bit hard to hear. We're currently enjoying a record level of aviation safety. That doesn't happen overnight, and it certainly doesn't happen by chance. A safety record like ours is the result of years, decades of intentional effort. The critical efforts of everyone in this room, from operators, manufacturers, labor unions, to private aircraft owners and pilots, the FAA, the NTSB, and the media. You've all contributed to our reputation as the global gold standard for aviation safety. But we can't take that for granted. I agree with the Secretary. I agree with Billy when he says that. Now, I often hear, in 10 of the last 12 years, there have been no airline passenger fatalities. That's true. But the absence of a fatality or an accident doesn't mean the presence of safety. And let me state that again. The absence of a fatality or an accident doesn't mean the presence of safety. There's always more we can do to improve safety, and we can't forget that. And we can't forget those who did die, because people did die in some of those 12 years. Not just in Part 121, also in Part 135, Part 91. The NTSB never forgets, not a single life lost. Zero is and always will be our goal. And I know it's many of yours as well. In calling for this safety summit, I'll call it a call to action. Billy said, now is the time to stare into the data and ask hard questions. I couldn't agree more. There have been far too many close calls and near collisions recently, any of which could have had devastating consequences with precious lives lost. The NTSB is currently investigating 6 runway incursions since January, including one at Austin where the aircraft came within 100 feet of each other, endangering the lives of 131 people on board 2 aircraft. The 2 planes in Burbank were within 300 feet of each other. We're also investigating 2 wrong runway landings that happened last June. One was a cargo plane in Tulsa with 2 crew members on board. The other was a passenger flight in Pittsburgh where 174 people were at risk. And we're investigating 2 significant events that occurred in December on the same day, both in Hawaii. One was a severe turbulence incident that left 25 people injured. In the other, the aircraft came within several hundred feet of hitting the Pacific Ocean. These recent incidents must serve as a wake-up call for every single one of us before something more catastrophic occurs, before lives are lost. Too often, we've seen the federal government and industry act after an accident, after lives are lost, once the headlines are made. Congressman Obastar, who was my boss and a big champion for aviation safety, called that the tombstone mentality. Our entire mission at the NTSB is to prevent that next accident. In fact, that's why we look at incidents, which is especially important in this pivotal moment, and it is a pivotal moment. This is a real challenging time for the industry. The industry is ramping back up from the pandemic, during which a number of people, including my friends, were either retired or were laid off. A new workforce is coming in and needs to be appropriately, adequately trained. Some who were out during the pandemic also need retraining. And our airspace, already the most complex in the world, is about to get even more congested. Drones, advanced air mobility, even more commercial space launches and reentries. There's a question I'm often asked when I give speeches. What keeps me up at night? What keeps me up at night is the next family that I have to talk to when we go on scene to investigate an accident. It's that next family. It's also the investigators that I talk with on scene who say, we've seen this before. We've issued recommendations on this. They haven't been acted upon. Those recommendations could have prevented this. It's heartbreaking, and it's especially heartbreaking for our investigators when they see that. Now, the NTSB has issued 7 recommendations on runway collisions that have not been acted upon. One is 23 years old and still appropriate today on technology warning pilots of an impending collision. How many times are we going to have to issue the same recommendations over and over and over again? When we do, and sometimes we get the response that it costs too much. I'm very passionate about safety, so I'm going to ask you to think about this. What is too expensive? Think about your loved ones. Do they deserve a price tag? Your spouse, your children, your best friend, your mom, your dad. That's who we're talking about. Now, the NTSB held a forum in 2017 on runway incursions. The FAA, industry, and labor made wonderful presentations. with the FAA highlighting pilot deviation and ATC communications as key concerns. We came out of that forum with everyone calling for better data and implementation of technology that would prevent runway incursions like ASDX and ASSC. So where are we 6 years later? What's happened? We have the data. We have the data. We know that there are about roughly 1,500 to 1,700 runway incursions annually. We know the vast majority of those are low to no risk, but there are some that are risky, and it only takes one. ASDX is only at 35 airports today. ASSC is at 8. Speaking of runway incursions, the 6 from this year that I mentioned earlier all have one thing in common. The cockpit voice recorders were all overwritten. Right now, you know that the CVRs only need to record 2 hours of audio before they're overwritten. We've recommended 25 hours. 25-hour CVRs don't just help all of us learn from accidents and incidents, it helps operators improve safety. The fact is, Europe has mandated 25-hour CVRs on new aircraft for over a year. We should do the same. We've also recommended that we retrofit certain in-service aircraft with 25-hour CVRs. I don't understand why it's so controversial. Both are NTSB recommendations stemming back from a 2018 almost tragedy. So we're still waiting for action. Let's talk about turbulence. It's the most common accident involving Part 121 air carriers. It's especially dangerous for flight attendants, where turbulence accounts for 3 out of every 4 flight attendant injuries. We issued a report in 2021 to prevent turbulence-related injuries. It had 21 new recommendations and 4 that were reiterated from weather reports to increase sharing of turbulence events, the need for flight attendants to be seated with their seatbelt buckled during certain phases of flight, and the need for parents to secure children under 2 in their own seat with an FAA-approved child restraint system. All 25 turbulence recommendations remain open. Addressing these and so many other issues is how we make our skies safer today. Aviation is safe, but tragedies still occur, and that can't be downplayed. And we have to address those. The time to act is now. We have lots of planned discussions today, and I'm excited to listen to everyone, but we also need planned action. Billy challenged us to examine everything from the U.S. aerospace system structure, culture, processes, and systems to the integration of our safety efforts. And he challenged us to ask the hard questions. Everyone in this room needs to ask ourselves the hard questions. That applies to me too. It applies to the FAA and others. All federal agencies here today need to ask, are we doing everything possible to make our skies safer? We've been asking ourselves that very question at the NTSB. And over the past year, we've been holding a series of safety summits of our own where we invite stakeholders from all modes of transportation to give us frank and candid feedback about how the NTSB is doing. What could we do better? How can we better improve safety? We have one more safety summit left on aviation, and we're targeting mid-April, so stay tuned. All that's to say, we are asking ourselves the hard questions. We all should, because our gold standard of aviation safety depends on it. Passengers depend on it. Your flight crews depend on it. Air traffic controllers depend on it. Dispatchers, mechanics, ground crew, flight attendants, and so many more. And so do their families. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hamidi, for those words and reminding us what's always at stake here. I want to say to the audience and to the flying public that our system is indeed incredibly safe. If we were to pull down this graphic there and that was just a whiteboard, part of what you would see, if I were to throw 5 dots up there, you would certainly notice them. In the time we've been sitting here today, we have flown just over 3.2 million flights this year to date. On any given day, we have 45,000 flights with a 1.7 to 2.4 million people, nearly 1 billion enplanements per year. Our system is incredibly safe. But that is not by accident, pardon the pun. It is because we are willing to stare into everything that we see and say, is there something that we missed? And you look around this room and the set of stakeholders here, it is because we're all willing to continually ask ourselves the question. So I really appreciate the chair's points there, and we're really looking forward to an engaged conversation. Before we get started, I want to just introduce our panel today for everyone, and before we invite them to the stage. First, we have Captain Jason Ambrosi. He's the president of the Airline Pilots Association, which represents more than 67,000 airline pilots in the United States and Canada. He's a qualified and current pilot flying the Boeing 767 International at Delta Airlines. Jason began his flying career as a regional pilot at Atlantic Southeast Airlines, hired by Delta in 2000, just 18 months prior to 9/11. And he was among the many pilots who were furloughed after the attack. Captain Ambrosi is also an active general aviation pilot and a certified flight instructor for single and multi-engine aircraft, instrument and rotorcraft, and helicopters. It's a man after my own heart. I fly the 767, flew helicopters for airplanes. So, welcome, Jason. Nick Callio is someone very familiar to the aviation world. Since he joined what was then the Air Transport Association in 2011, Nick has made indelible changes, not only on the organization he now leads, but on the industry he now represents. Prior to coming to the aviation industry, Nick had already led a distinguished career. I won't go through all of it. We'd be here all day. But among other things, he led the worldwide government affairs for Citigroup as part of their senior leadership team. Nick also served as the White House liaison to Congress under 2 presidents, George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush. Nick is a native of Cleveland, Ohio, and has received many honors and recognition. Thanks, Nick, for being here today. Todd Hopley is president and CEO of American Association of Airport Executives. Founded in 1928, AAAE is the world's largest professional organization representing the individuals who work at commercial and general aviation airports. AAA's 9,000 members represent more than 850 airports and hundreds of companies and organizations that support the airport industry. Todd is only the 3rd CEO in organization history. If I do the math, that's about 30 years each. That's a lot of time. He joined AAA in 1991 prior to becoming CEO, was responsible for overseeing the association's interactions with Congress and the executive branch. Welcome, Todd, today. Rich Santa is serving his first 3-year term as the 7th president of the National Air Traffic Controllers Association, or NACA. He was elected by acclamation and took office on September 1st, 2021. As an air traffic controller from Washington Air Route Traffic Control Center, Rich previously served as NATCA's National Executive Board as the Eastern Regional Vice President from 2018 to 2021. He began his career as a controller in New York in 1997 before transferring to Washington in 2001. Rich has spent most of his career serving NACA and its members, including 4 terms as Washington Center Facility Representative prior to being appointed as the alternate Eastern Regional NEA Vice President. So, Rich, welcome. Ed Bolin became the president and CEO of the National Business Aviation Association in Washington, D.C. on September 2004, September 7th. Prior to joining the BAA, Ed was president and CEO of the General Aviation Manufacturers Association, or GAMA, for 8 years. In 2001, Ed was appointed by President Bush to serve as the member of the Commission on the Future of the U.S. Aerospace System. He is also a former chairman of the FAA's Management Advisory Council. Ed is currently a member of the Board of Directors of the National Aeronautics Association and serves on the Aviation Advisory Board for the MITA Corporation. Welcome, Ed. Faye Malarkey Black serves as president and CEO of the Regional Airline Association and has led the organization since February of 2015. In her role, she leads an industry trade organization representing 18 North American regional airlines and 80 associate members. With more than 2 decades of experience in policy, strategic leadership, business development, and management, Faye has served the RAA since 1998. She was formerly Senior Vice President of Government Affairs. Faye is a member of the Transportation Research Board's Standing Committee on Commercial Airlines and was appointed by the U.S. Department of Transportation Working Group on Small Community Air Service in 2017. Thank you, Faye, for being here this morning. Which brings me to my co-moderator for this panel, former NTSB Chairman Robert Zumwalt. Robert is currently Executive Director of the Center for Aviation and Aerospace Safety at Embry-Riddle University in Daytona Beach. He previously served 15 years as board member, vice chair, and chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board. While at the board, Robert was a fierce advocate for improving safety in all modes of transportation. He was a pilot for 32 years, including 24 years with Piedmont Airline and U.S. Airways. He accumulated in excess of 14,000 hours. Following his airline career, Robert managed the corporation aviation department for a Fortune 500 energy company. He chaired the Airline Pilots Association Human Factors and Training Group and co-founded the association's Critical Incidents Response Program. He also spent 8 years as a consultant to NASA's Aviation Safety Reporting System, or ASRS for those who know it, and has written extensively on aviation safety matters. Robert, thank you for joining us today. And with that, I'm going to ask you to say a few words. And if our panelists can join us on the stage here, we will get things going.
Jason? Thank you. Go ahead. Do you want to bounce one? Billy, thank you. I really did have some things to say, but frankly, it's all been said already. So anyway, great job, Jennifer. Secretary did a nice job. You did a good job. I look at what we're having here. I look at it as like the human body having a fever. It's something that's signaling us that something is not exactly right. And so I think we're here today to really listen as much as anything. So again, thank you for pulling all this together. So I'll start out with the questions, and I think the way we've got this set up is that really there are a couple of themes that we want to cover. Yes. The resilience of the national airspace, the mitigating risk, and finally pressure on the system. So we'll start out with the theme of the resilience, but before we do that, I want to ask a question to everybody on the panel, and that is, basically, what in the heck is going on out there? We've been having a recent spate of undesirable events. What are these events trying to tell us? So why don't we just go around, and we'll start with Nick, the airline's perspective, and we'll just go around, and then we'll hear from Rhonda has ordered these in a certain way. So I'll go along and with Rhonda's preferred order. But Nick, where's Rhonda? Rhonda has really done a great job of pulling this together, as well as your entire team. So Nick, from the airline perspective, what's going on out there?
We're trying to figure out what is going on. First, I want to say thank you to Billy and the FAA for putting this on, and for everyone for being here. It's always great to go first. I thought you were going to ask me what kept me up at night, and I was going to say sleep apnea. But anyway, look, we're in a constant, we are the safest system in the world for a good reason. There's constant self-evaluation always going on. Our members look at operator data, aggregate data, and then incidents like that occurred. I don't want to speculate a lot on what's happened there because they're all under investigation, and we're all trying to determine what is going on. Is this a trend? Is this a pattern? And if so, what is it that we could find out to use as predictive tools to stop it? So that's partially why we're here today. I think the breakout sessions will probably get into that in a little more detail.
Great, thanks. Faye, from the RAA perspective.
I think I want to echo what Nick said, and I also, I'm incredibly admiring of the fact that we're all here today. The last time we had a safety call to action was after a series of accidents, and today I give you all the credit because we're here after a series of incidents, and I think that shows us how far we've come on our journey. We all talk about this as safety is not a destination, it's a continuous journey, and we've made a lot of progress, but it also serves as a warning call that we can't allow ourselves to become complacent. I think a large part of the reason that our system is so safe today is that we don't guess. We wait for the data, and we all are waiting for the data, but we don't need the data to tell us that the system, as you said, Robert, the signals are blinking caution for us, and we do well to heed that. And so as we wait for those facts and the data to come out, I think we don't need to wait to redouble our standards of professionalism and professional standards across the industry and work together in partnership to see how we can continue to advance further.
Thanks. So we've heard from the major carriers, we've heard from the regional carriers. We'd like to turn now to the airports. Todd?
Thank you. I'd echo Nick's comments on thanking everybody for being here. Thank you, Mr. Administrator, for pulling this together. I see in the audience former Administrator Huerta, also very committed to safety over the course of his tenure and leadership. Thank you, Michael. The system is safe, and we need to pay very careful attention always to hit that 99.99999 level of safety. One of the challenging things that I think we'll talk about a little later is this ramp up in the workforce, where we have lots of new entrant workers into the system, lots of folks who exited for a period of time and have come back, and all of those folks need training, either as first-time people in the system or folks who need that muscle memory to kick back in after a period of being away from the system. So we're very focused, airports are very focused on training, on workforce issues, and I hope we'll have a chance to talk about that.
Fantastic, thank you. Jason, I was a pilot for many years and did Alpha safety work for 17 years. I'd love to hear your perspective.
Well, first, thank you for that, and thank you, Billy, for putting this together. It's needed. So we are at the safest time in history right now. A lot of good work came out of the 2010 bill after the Flight 3407, and we continue to march forward. But we can't be complacent. We have to continue to look at what's going on. The signals, as we see, data shows that safety is there. We're doing a good job. But as we see, these incidents are out there. So we need to take a hard look, and I'm glad to be part of that. Pilots are at the pointy end of the tube. So we're there every day, and we see what's going on. So we're happy to engage in this. We hope this is not just a short-term thing, that we continue to do this, because in the post-COVID environment, there's so much training. There's so many new people, as Todd said, that we all need to be stakeholders in this to work together, and I look forward to getting in a more deep dive this afternoon in the breakout sessions.
Thank you so much. Rich, from the air traffic controller's perspective.
First of all, thank you, Mr. Administrator, for setting this up in the invitation. Anytime we get leaders together to discuss safety, it's productive. And we are safe, but there are pressure points, and they're good pressure points. The industry has recovered faster than we thought, but we need to acknowledge that. We have staffing and funding delays, I think, system-wide, and being here to discuss those, it's the appropriate response, and I'm proud of it.
Thanks. Ed, NBAA's perspective, business aviation.
Yeah, well, once again, thanks to everyone. Billy often says that safety is our North Star, and having an opportunity to come together and focus on the North Star is a very worthy endeavor. I'm going to take just a second, Robert. We have a lot of people up here from the commercial aviation industry. Everybody knows that. They know military aviation. I'm blessed to be part of the general aviation community, which is effectively everything else. And it's a primary training ground for pilots and technicians. It's a primary area for new technology to be introduced. It's critical for our emergency response and access to airports and airspace. The industry that I represent, the association I represent, was founded 76 years ago. And it was founded with the understanding that for general aviation to grow and all of aviation to grow, we had to be safe and we had to be perceived to be safe. And today we're trying to address both of those and enhance that state of the art. And I think, as Billy suggested in his opening remarks, complacency is our enemy and vigilance is our responsibility. We have lots of layers of safety, lots of layers of redundancy. And sometimes those layers of redundancy can allow someone to say, it's all okay, I can relax. That's not the way we are. We've got to be vigilant. Today is a call to vigilance, and I really am happy to be able to participate in it. Thank you.
Thank you all. You know, runway incursions, that's runway safety. That's what's gotten us here today. But are there other things? Are the runway incursions, are they just symptomatic of other issues that may be in the system? Any thoughts on that? Are there other things that we need to be paying attention to? I think that's the big question. Is this the fever that's trying to tell us something? Any thoughts on that?
I'll share my view. I think, you know, what we're seeing now, what we're all aware of, and part of the reason we're here in this, I like how you put it, the call to vigilance, is that the environment is changing. And it's a good time to talk about the tools of safety and how we can make sure that we stay ahead of those changes. We don't just keep up, but we stay 2 steps ahead. And we see that pace of change is accelerating. So change is not new, but the pace with which we're experiencing is new. And partnership is going to be really important as we go forward. And we look at new entrants coming in and the new technology. As that shifts, so does a risk associated with it. And we ought to be not just talking about the incidents right now, but the incidents that we might be seeing tomorrow with new entrants coming in.
Thanks. Other thoughts on that? Why don't we switch to the topic of, and we did say the first topic would really be resiliency of the National Airspace System. And so, Rich, I'm going to ask you this, and Ed as well. When we speak about resilience, we mean the ability of a system to continue functioning or to return to functioning when faced with adversity or disruptions. So what actions can we as an industry take to ensure the continued safety resiliency of the system?
Oh, thank you. Unfortunately, we have a staffing issue right now as air traffic controllers. We are 1,200 certified professional controllers less now than we were 10 years ago. When you have less eyes, when you have less positions open, that demands a reduction of efficiency to contest the safety risks that are introduced. It's time for us to accurately and adequately staff the facilities so we can have that resiliency, we can keep the efficiencies, we can continue to provide the safest services to the users in this industry. Fortunately, Billy and Tim, we have a product in place right now that can fix that, permanent fix to the pendulum of staffing issues in the facilities. I'm proud to say that on a day-to-day basis, we provide industry the safest national airspace system. We can do that today. But with delivering, and we're on the cusp of delivering a new staffing model with new staffing numbers at the facility and a control workforce plan that transparently reports what we need. We deliver that, and we can deliver all of the resiliency, all the efficiency, all the redundancy, and all the safety and margins that industry deserves.
Thanks, Rich. Ed?
Yeah, a remarkably resilient system that we have, and I agree completely with Rich about the importance of having proper staffing, full staffing. I also want to point out that part of resiliency is having redundancies. And we have a lot of them, but there are areas specifically with technology where I think we can add to that. And I think the example of that is really in NOTAMs. We had a situation where we lost the NOTAM system for a couple of hours, the impact was significant. I think we can recognize there is an opportunity where, with urgency and with funding, we can move forward with increased technology, and we can make sure that the NOTAMs themselves don't just provide data, but actual information. I want to congratulate the FAA on focusing on how we can shorten that time frame and make that a reality.
Well, thank you very much for that. Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Rich. A part of our challenge here today is, what are those things? So you recognize that we are continuing to hire. We're on pace to hire 1,500 controllers this year. We're on pace to hire 1,800 controllers next year. To your point, we're looking at ways of how we bring forward the modernization of our national airspace system. You've heard me say it in print, if you will. We manage essentially 3 national airspace systems. We have the legacy, which ushered in and gave us the jet age. We have what next gen has enabled us to do in terms of efficiency, from datacom to SWIM to ERAM and to all of the things that we have, and we continue to advance the calls of that. We've got thousands of systems within the agency, and to your point, right? So we've undertaken a role to say, how do we continue to evolve that? But looking to the more immediate, right? What can we, our talk this morning, how do we come away with 2 or 3 actionable steps, even while we stare into these other challenges that have been laid out for a couple of the opening comments? So let me turn to one of the most important contributors to the safety of our national airspace, and that's really our people. Be it our people at the FAA, the people in your organizations, the people across the industry, in airlines, airports, the federal government, in an industry that relies on experience to mitigate risk. How are we accounting for? Faye did a wonderful job of talking about how do we account for the pace of change, and which shows no signs of slowing down. So I'm going to turn for this question, starting with Faye, and then we'll go to Todd. We'll have Nick, and then we'll wrap it with Jason on this one. So what do you think when it comes to our people?
That's a great question for me, because change and fresh faces are not new for regional aviation. That's been part of our reality for a long time. But again, the pace of that change has accelerated and amplified tremendously. And in a lot of work groups, what we're hearing from our carriers is that some of that attrition that we're seeing is stabilizing, particularly with flight attendants, airport agent, aircraft maintainers. The one area where we're seeing just a constant flow, and that's a good thing because it's career growth, is in the pilot workforce, and that will not slow anytime soon. With about half of our nation's qualified pilots facing their mandatory retirement within 15 years, we are going to be training and hiring tens of thousands of new pilots over the next 2 decades. And it is extremely, extremely important when we're doing this that we focus on building the right foundation from the start. I'm not going to get into qualification and some of the touchy issues that can be polarizing there, but even if we never talk about a single credit anywhere, we've got to look at the training that happens in the foundation and making sure that we have the right supplemental training, making sure that we have the right bridge programs, and making sure that we're not relying solely on flight hours as a proxy for experience, because that's not serving us well today. The reality of that is when the pilots come into our training sessions, they have high flight time, they're not quite as well prepared for the Part 121 environment, haven't seen icing, don't really master the dynamics of swept wing aerodynamics, don't have experience in traffic, don't have a lot of crew resource management or experience with multi-crew operations. And so those are things that we should be focusing on and making sure that we're preparing pilots in the right way. But I think it's important for all of us when we're talking about this risk, because this is a risk, that we finish the sentence with how we're addressing that risk. And so here's what we're doing today, which I think may be helpful as we move forward as this pace of change continues, which, when we see the candidates come in, we're providing a lot of extra training. So all of our carriers, for example, have expanded their training footprint, often considerably. We're giving extra support, extra classroom time, extra sim sessions, in some cases, extra IOE. But we are making sure that we are preparing the pilots fully before they're released to line flying. And we will put aircraft on the ground before we'll allow anybody to fly and operate in a manner that's unsafe. But I think that's really important. And you know, the one thing we've talked about in the pace of change is that as the risks change, so have the technologies. And so have our capabilities to address some of these. So, you know, I think the challenge to all of us is in partnership to lean into those technologies and see where they can take us in building a stronger foundation from start.
Thank you very much for that. Todd, what are we seeing on the airport side for our people? Yeah.
Well, just picking up on Faye's point about training. Airports didn't have the same churn in their employee base that a lot of other parts of the ecosystem did. In order to receive the COVID relief funding, airports had to keep 90% of their team in place. But we have seen with a lot of the tenants, contractors, partners that we have at the airports, an awful lot of churn there. And so training and getting everybody up to speed ends up being super important in our view. That's a lot of what AAA does. Don't want to turn it into a AAA commercial, but since 9/11, 1,700 safety-related courses that we've produced. 372 airports have computer-based training. We have classroom training. It's impossible to overtrain in this environment, I would suggest. And making sure that people that are new to our arena, new to our ecosystem, are committed to that safety culture that all of us that have spent decades in it, are used to. We have to make sure that that is the North Star, that all of the folks coming in are really focused on. So for us, we really believe that training and looking at the composition of this new workforce is a really important piece to this puzzle.
Thank you very much for that. Nick, your thoughts?
Well, we worry about juniority. We've hired 100,000 new people. We find that we need more people, more employees now than we did pre-pandemic to cover the changing environment. And what the carriers are doing is training, and more training. And they're looking at their proficiency requirements for each and every job and making sure that the proficiency requirements meet the job and the new environment, and then putting people together with more experienced people, because experience does matter, as we all know.
Here. Thank you. Thanks for that. And Jason, 6,000 to 7,000 people that you represent. Give us your thoughts.
Well, it's not just new pilots. Yeah. It's new everybody. Controllers, flight attendants, ground people. So it's just in this post-COVID rapid recovery, there's just so much going on. And it's I'm very refreshed to hear all the emphasis on training, because I couldn't agree more. In this environment, when you have so many people, fast upgrades, you've got, new people flying with each other, more training, focused on making sure that these employees have the tools they need to go out there and keep the system. I mean, the system is safe. And, the last thing we should be talking about is reducing any regulations or experience requirements. We should be talking about what can we do to add, not an equivalent level, but a better level of safety, and keep pushing that bar higher. But, we just get people the tools they need. Mentoring. We lost a lot of senior captains in early retirements, and there is that progression that Nick and Faye talked about. It's just getting back to mentoring and making sure that all the new people come in have that mentor, because they have the time, they have the experience. It's just that they're in a new job, they're doing something different, and all these new people together need to be able to have the experience of the old salts out there and say, hey, look, what was it like back in the day, and what can I glean from this, and so on. So mentoring, I think, is something that can come out of this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I do want to just take a moment to give a shout out, because we recognize we've talked a lot about the airports, and certainly what we see on the flight deck. So I just want to give a shout out to Sarah Nelson, who's in the audience with us this morning, president of AFA. Huge constituency there, that it goes beyond the flight deck door there, and I know there's a lot of work involved in this space, and so I really appreciate that. I'll be curious later on, I know we'll get to it, when we think about the robustness of SMSs is out there for airports now. I know we got a later question on that, but as we think about it from this whole community perspective, I wonder how well the SMSs are capturing when we think about training, just the volume of data we have with our reporting programs, and if anything new that's telling us. So we talked a little bit about the resilience, and we think about that system, how well is it working? Certainly, key to that is our people. But, going to the pressure. So I've heard newness. I've heard training. I heard post-pandemic, we've had some significant numbers of retirements. And so as the flying has come back with a vengeance, so to speak, and I think we're closing in on near 2019 numbers, at least the numbers I see virtually every morning when I come into the office. And we think of pressures on the system and how we as a community collectively take ownership of that and have an understanding about what the risk is to the system. My question, I'm going to go to Nick and then stick on this side with Nick and Jason, is people are flying again. We're back to those numbers, and maybe that comes with its own set of challenges. Are we putting too much demand on the system? And if so, what pressures are we putting on the system that we think might be reducing our safety margin? So, Nick, back to you.
I don't think we're putting too much demand on the system. Right now, we are getting back to 2019 numbers, but we are flying 10% fewer flights a day than we did, and that's because we've had to adjust our schedules to meet the demand and make sure that we're not putting that demand or not putting too much demand on the system. I think that's important. We're going to continue to do that going forward in collaboration with you, which we have to, we do on a daily basis. I would like to make one more point, though, which kind of goes back to the resiliency. 17 organizations, including A4A and everybody on this stage, sent a letter to Congress last week saying that we needed to adequately fund the FAA. There needs to be funding for staffing. There needs to be funding for technology. And right now, we're not meeting that demand, and that's what we're going to have to do to modernize the airspace and meet all these new demands that are coming on, whether it be new entrants or old entrants. There's a lot that can be done. But, your budget can't be used almost solely for operations and Band-Aids. You've got to have more money, and Congress has to make that investment.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I will say, on the Hill a couple of times, and Nick, you've been on the Hill many times. I took to heart that, there's a level, there's an energy there about how we support and how we ensure that we continue the journey of modernization, that we, the agency, have the tools we need, and collectively we can all meet the demands. I know the industry continues to invest billions and billions of dollars. We're doing our side, and having that consistent, stable funding is important to us. Jason.
So in the recovery, no one forecasted the recovery being quite so fast. So the airlines, in my opinion, brought flying back too fast. But so we saw a lot of cancellations. My carrier was part of it. Other carriers have been part of that. There was bringing it back because there's such a training backlog. Airlines displace pilots, and it takes a long time to train a pilot for a reason. Every time we switch seat, it's a lengthy process or aircraft. It creates a delay. And not knowing when the recovery is going to happen, airlines displace pilots, and now it's going back the other direction. I mean, there are more pilots than ever, especially at the largest airlines, but we're not operating them out of flights because of all that training backlog. So that puts a stress on the system. But I also add that distractions are putting a stress on this system. So we're dealing with all the new people. We're dealing with getting people back in the seats where they need to be, but then distractions like 5G, right? So pilots are dealing with, am I going to be able to shoot this approach at this airport? We're dealing with stuff like that. The NOTAM issue, dealing with, any number of other things that are not having enough technology. We talk about technology. Jennifer spoke about getting these things in place at airports. Some airports have, the protection systems to back us up. Pilots love technology. Nothing replaces two well-trained pilots in the cockpit at all times, at a minimum. But we need that technology to help us make sure that you don't blunder across a runway. There's a lot of distractions out there in our business. Sometimes it's something as simple as an airline changes a procedure and does it via memo. So you're trying to incorporate that at the same time you're doing whatever else you need to be doing in the course of the day. So it just, with everything going on at one time and it's massive recovery, it's just, that's part of the breakouts. I think we'll be focusing on how can we try to minimize some of these distractions and get back to focusing on the task at hand.
Well, I really appreciate that, and I think that's a very salient point. Having spent time myself at 3 different airlines, both here and international, and distraction sometimes is key. How do we manage our way through that? And we've talked, this incredible period of change, but the constant, I think we can admit, has always been strong professionals that checklist, that procedural mentality that we know, the old adage for pilots is where am I going and how do I get there, and what might be in between me and there. So there are lots of things. So I really, really appreciate the point. So Robert, back to you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Rich, I'd like to ask you this, and Todd, you as well. How can airport investment in airport and air traffic infrastructure play a role in increasing the industry safety record?
Yeah, well, I think Nick and Jason just hit it right on the head. We need tools, we need technology, and we need funding. There's a synergistic approach to getting that technology in the hands of professionals that can utilize to increase safety margins, efficiencies, and help the industry. We haven't had that, quite honestly. We're fix on fail right now. You see it in the NOTAMs, you see it in the CID issues, you see it in some of our radar systems, and that's not a way to run with resiliency and redundancy and safety margins and efficiencies. We can get there. Obviously, some of our lower level facilities are being adjusted better for us right now, but the ergonomics and the studies and the technology increases, they need to be increased and escalated so that we can get the best tools for the NAS.
Yeah. Now we heard Jennifer mentioned ASDX, 35 airports. What are your thoughts on that?
There's 35 airports, but I believe there's no parts to replace broken. So they're in 35 airports, but we have airports right now that don't have a serviced ASDX because we cannot fix them. The fix on fail doesn't even work there because they're not supported anymore. We need new systems, new funding, new technologies.
Thank you.
Yes.
So Todd?
Well, I agree with what Rich said and what Nick said earlier about the need for funding. As it relates to airports and on the ground, FAA has basically 4 kind of buckets of money for airport projects: safety, security, capacity, and noise projects. Safety, having always been and will be the number one priority for the FAA in terms of funding projects. Critically important, whether that's new runways and new taxiways or rehabbing runways and taxiways, whether that's dealing with deconflicting aircraft and ground vehicle movements, dealing with reconfiguring, geometry so that you have less runway incursions in the airfield. All of those things are absolutely critical to be funded. And the challenge that we habitually face is that the needs in the system are so much greater than what the federal government has been able to support. Even with the new stream of funding that's come in from the infrastructure bill, inflation has eaten away at that. Whether you're trying to buy a piece of ATO technology or a construction project at an airport, your purchasing power has diminished dramatically over the past several years. And so again, one of the challenges that we need to keep a close eye on is how do we fund all of these projects in an environment where the purchasing power is not as great as it should be, and Congress hasn't been able to supply the money that it needs to make sure that we have all of the safety, security, capacity projects in place.
So if what I would add, I want to bring us back sort of to the immediate, right? If you look at these 6 events that the chair spoke to, right? None of those are really related to immediate funding, right? You've got 2 trained pilots on the flight deck. You've got two airplanes that take off without a clearance. You have people that verifying what runway am I turning on, right? Is that a basic blocking and tackling? Is that a fundamental? I don't know, something for us to think of. But I absolutely agree, and we'd agree that long term, collectively what's being done on the industry side, what we're doing at the FAA, and just take it from the whole of government, right? That we are ensuring that we keep pace. We're incredibly complex, and there's no place in the world. The next closest, if you just look at it from an air navigation provider, the next closest is Nav Canada, and they're a 10th our size. So, this isn't about beating the drum that we are doing bad. This safe period of time, since 2009, for commercial passengers, we have flown in the U.S. the equivalent of the world population in that time. So I want to just take a moment to think that. But that doesn't mean we take any of this for granted, right? Our goal is to continue to steer into it. I would like us to think of, how do we, what are those kind of, some concrete action steps we can take, certainly for us within the agency, and we all have an ownership stake. And I love, Jason, what both you, Todd, and Nick have said about this. Going to, a question I want to toss to both to Ed and Faye is, every day, both of you watch the system from your own unique perspective. And within your organizations, we ask these hard questions. So from both of your perspective, where do you think we're most vulnerable?
Well, I think across the system, we're vulnerable to complacency. Yeah. And exactly as you said there, Billy, basic blocking and tackling, that commitment to be vigilant every day is really important. Now, we've talked a lot about the importance of training, and I think that's something that every one of our organization is very outgoing about. At NBAA, for example, we hold safety stand-downs for single pilot operations. We participate in safety stand-downs for more complex operations. We have a safety committee that operates. We systematically participate in things like the General Aviation Joint Safety Team. So I think part of what we need to do is to make sure that we are facilitating communication, understanding, and engagement. Making sure that the training actions are actually what are happening on the day-to-day basis. That's the fundamental. How do we make sure that the checklist is the checklist? The compliance means compliance. Those are some of the basic fundamentals. And as fully emphatically as we can support all of the comments that have been made on the importance of funding, I do want to make sure that we're underscoring the point that you just made. We're the largest, we're the safest, we're the most efficient, and we're the most diverse air transportation system in the world. And the only way we keep it that way is by that constant vigilance, every day communicating how do we get better. Because just as Jason said, sometimes the environment in which we're operating in changes. 5G is brand new. That wasn't something we put into the environment, but it is part of our environment. So there are things where we need to recognize things are changing around us, and it's up to us to keep up with every one of those changes.
Yep. And Administrator Nolan, if you had asked me that question first, I would have also led right with complacency. So I'm just going to build on what Ed has said, and maybe go into, how do you assure that complacency? Because as you said, it's got to be all of us working together. And the safer our system gets, the more seductive it is to think we're safe enough and we've reached our destination. So how do you continuously focus on, how do you avoid thinking that what seems safe may not be? And as Chair Hamady said, the absence of accidents is not necessarily the presence of safety. And I think it involves buy-in. I think it means that we don't issue these directives top down, but that they come bottom up, side to side. They've got to be embedded throughout the entire culture of an organization so that every professional, from the trade association executives to the leaders of our organizations down to the frontline employees, understand that the safety of the system is in their hands. It's in all of our hands. Yep. And I think you get that buy-in by engaging the workforce at every level.
I couldn't agree with you more. It just reminds me, I know we talk a lot about places, some folks may see that term in different ways, but we recognize this is an industry where you have to bring your A game every time, every day, every year. We're fortunate to have, Captain Sully in the office, in the audience today, right? You got to be on, and you got to be ready, and you got to be prepared. That's what we do as professionals, and the same applies to the agency. We all have a vested, and I love the term because I'm just an all-in kind of guy, and that's what it takes for all of us to make sure, and that's why we're here. I love what we said earlier. We're here, and you said it, Faye, we're here before something happens, right? So we've progressed. The better goal, maybe the next time we're only here talking about predictors and precursors, and we haven't even had a near miss yet, but we started to see that in the system. So thank you for that input. So let's turn to mitigating risk. The key component of a safety management system, especially a robust safety management system, it is the extent to which an organization manages its risk, and that follow-up and that constant evaluation from an assurance framework. So I'm going to stay with you, Faye, and say, airlines have been required to use their safety management systems to address risk for many years now. How does this contribute to the resilience of the system, and is it still working today?
I'm going to take your question in two parts. But before I do, I think I think everyone in this room knows what safety management systems are. But for the viewers who are maybe watching this live cast, I think it's really important to explain that these are the tools of safety. And they really are what allow us to go past that tombstone mentality where we're just relying on accident forensics, and we're going to the data, both individual and aggregate, and seeing what the data, information, errors, trends tell us, and then collaborating together so that we mitigate that risk. And SMS really goes to the heart of identifying and mitigating risk in the system. I opened up today talking about the last safety call to action, and during that call to action, Administrator Babbitt challenged the industry to embrace and adopt SMS, and to do so voluntarily before regulation. So we have been required to use them for some years, but even before that, airlines were embracing these technologies. Regional airlines leaned in early and eagerly on that. And boy, I have to tell you, that has paid off. That has paid off in spades. There is no single program that does more to advance our safety today than SMS. And it is absolutely crucial that we nurture them. And I think that gets to the second part of your question is, are they still working? SMS is a system, right? But it's a system that's made up of human beings. And it's only going to work as long as the human beings in the system feel safe. They feel the data is safe. They feel that the culture, that there's a just culture, and that they are safe there to share those incidents and errors that could make them personally vulnerable, because they're doing so that we can learn from them before a little mistake becomes a big catastrophic incident. I know that carriers from time to time need to refresh the SMS programs. We shouldn't just have them on the top shelf. We need to constantly take them out and refresh them, to have retraining at all levels, from the executives down to, again, the frontline employees, and ensure that it's well understood and embraced, again, emphasizing that system safety is in all of our hands. I think going forward, it's going to be key, and I applaud the FAA for advancing SMS to other industry groups. I know that you all will benefit from it the same way that we have, and even in the foundational, the pilot training institutions now too. So you're growing up with SMS, and that couldn't be any more important. So I absolutely believe SMS is working. I think we have more room to grow there, to constantly refresh and make sure that those tools stay as sharp as they need to be, because they are the tools of safety.
Yeah, let me jump in there while we're talking about SMS. Don Arndt, the late Don Arndt from FAA, said that he's almost half-jokingly mentioned to me one morning at breakfast a number of years ago that said, Robert, maybe we ought to change the name of it from Safety Management System to just Safety Management. And his point is that when you talk about safety management system, everybody wants it. Oh, we've got to get SMS. Whereas safety management is an active thing. And I thought that Don made a good point with that. Really, safety management is you're managing safety. It's a business approach to managing safety, and organizations they value, they manage properly those things that they value. I worked for a nonprofit for a number of years, U.S. Air, and
an intentional nonprofit, and a nonprofit nonetheless.
Most people value safety, so therefore value finances. So they put in place mechanisms to manage finances. And why do they do that? Because finances are important to them. They have a chief financial officer. They audit. They have internal audits and external audits. They have procedures in place that they're always very dogmatic about following. And why do they do that? Well, because finances are important to them. So if safety is important to organizations, they should be actively managing safety in the same sense. A chief safety a chief safety officer, internal audits, external audits, procedures, policies, and guidelines that you are constantly following, assessing the things that can be damaging to the organization. So I'm a big proponent of SMS, and so just think of it as a business approach to managing safety. It's an active thing that we're doing. It's not something that we have. So I just wanted to jump in there with that.
Well, thank you for that. Some great points there. So Todd, for for airports, we've just rolled out, of course, SMS for airports. So as you think about, as that starts to proliferate across airports, you've got, of course, airlines point to, some of which a decade on now have had their SMSs going strong. How do you see it playing out in airports, and what tools are you helping to help your members get up to speed?
Right. So you did, in fact, roll out a rule last month, but it's not a new issue for airports. There's a number of airports that have voluntarily put SMS in place. San Francisco, Seattle, Minneapolis, Atlanta, Sacramento, there are other airports. But now we're going to scale that across the system. And that's going to be very beneficial for all of the reasons that Faye gave such an articulate answer on. So I think it's very beneficial that we're going to have this expansion across many of the airports in the system. In terms of what are we doing to help on that, again, we've been teaching courses on airport SMS for a number of years, and then our sister organization, ACI-NA, and AAAE in the late Q3, early Q4 of this year will hold an SMS conference with, I hope, the active participation of the FAA to try and really help educate airports across the system about embracing this and effectively running with it. And I can't help myself. I just worry a little bit about your story. I'm not sure we would want to go with aviation S&M. I don't think that one's going to work. So I think we need to stick with SMS.
Okay, very good.
Fair enough.
Thanks for that, Todd. Ed, turning to you, I'm mindful, one of the things, our goal is to be able to cover the entire aviation ecosystem with SMSs, right? So now, of course, we've got the rule, we're working through the NPRM process, notice of proposed rulemaking for charter operators, for air tour operators, for manufacturers. How do you see this playing out in the business and general aviation safety?
Well, I want to underscore SMS is a great safety tool. And it's one that has been embraced by our industry for a long time. There's an international standard for business aviation operations that we are enthusiastic about. SMS is a great safety tool, but it is in every case, the tool needs to be sized to recognize the challenge. A saw is a great cutting tool, and a scalpel is a great cutting tool. Right. They're not interchangeable. So as we look through what we're trying to accomplish, and I think Robert was really good about pointing out this has got to be a living, breathing part of everybody's life. So getting the rule right, allowing it to scale for the diversity of operations is really important. That goal is everybody's. We want to enhance an already safe system. This is the tool to do it. It's already being embraced as we move to the requirements and to the rule, and the comments end on April 11th. Let's make sure we're getting it scaled right so it is a workable tool.
All right.
Yeah, thanks. I'm gonna skip around just a little bit here. Billy and I had made up some questions here and created some questions, but the FAA has done a number of tremendous changes to impact the safety of our system, especially in commercial aviation. We've got SMS, we've got CAST being two notable achievements, which have really been very effective. The FAA is here to listen, to learn what are the biggest opportunities for the FAA to transform their approach to aviation in the coming decades. I mean, that's really an open-ended question. I mean, what are the biggest opportunities for the FAA moving forward?
I'll start with that. We got to start with today and get proper funding, long-term leadership, and start tackling these projects. This piecemeal funding from Congress where you pay for a little bit, then another year we got to go try to get some more. There needs to be a vision to go beyond long term. This is where we're going 10 years from now, and let's decide today we're going to do it instead of this every year we got to piece a little bit through it. Get that process started, get that technology, all the stuff that's been recommended that's still not there. We need to get that started. Then, get more people, more money, start doing the SMS in-house. Don't outsource things. Just start today with what you need today and then let it grow from there, because it's great to look long term, but we have issues today that need to be tackled. Air traffic, NOTAMs, everything. This stuff needs to be tackled today.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Let me touch on the role of technology, because it is so important in our ability to move forward. And we all know through the years how important technologies like autopilot have moved us forward. And over the past couple of years, we're seeing enormous technologies coming to the market. We've got commercial heads-up displays combined with enhanced vision systems. We have not just autopilot, but auto land. And we're looking at a time when new technologies have the opportunity to effectively change the way we move people from point A to point B. And the FAA is forward-leaning on that. We need to be the world leader, but I think we need to keep our focus. We need to have the people play their part. But there are these technologies that need to come to the market. And we've got to recognize the longer they're delayed, there is a safety impact on that. And I see one of the great general aviation leaders, Colonel Pete Bunce, is here. He'll be leading a panel this afternoon. But the number of breakthroughs that have the ability to enhance both efficiency and safety need to come to the market. And keeping that pathway vigilant and adapting to that technology, I think, is really important.
Okay. Other thoughts on that?
I'll add to that. I think we can tie both of those up, the funding and the staffing, but also the securing of that, the way we get new equipment is archaic. It takes years and years and years, and the stop-and-go funding of our industry prevents us from getting it out in a timely manner when it's not obsolete before we get it in place.
I had one other thought too, which is really just keep doing one of the things that you're doing so well today, which is engaging and communicating with all of us. Every one of us have safety organizations behind us, and you and all of your people are routinely there talking with us. You are the regulator, but we also collaborate. And, just as we were talking about SMS not necessarily being top down, neither is aviation safety. And a lot of times industry brings ideas to the forefront, and FAA is right there. And I think to Ed's point and Rich's point, as technology advances, being there for the new emerging technologies and understanding that. My son had a teacher who said, we're training kids for jobs that don't exist yet. And we're trying to fund the FAA for technology that doesn't exist yet. And I think engagement and making sure that we stay right there and present with the existing users and the new users are going to benefit us all.
Let me just say, just to input a couple of things. I was at the Runway Gallery. Anyone should go there during your time here. But there was a sign there that I really like. It says the present is now the once unimaginable future. And then the lights go off and says the present is now the future. We really are living the future, right? Mm-hmm. And I hope it doesn't come as any surprise to this audience and to those listening, is that we've stood up. We're working on a project called Innovate 28, right? We've got 800 plus licensed drones already in the NASA. We're already thinking through how we enable electrical vertical takeoff and landing. We're working on that regulatory framework. I travel along with our FAA executive team. We traveled the world last year, working with our partners globally. And certainly, for most of them, we are still that bright shining star on a hill, right? Because the rate and the pace in which we move, our ability to work together, recognizing some of the constraints we're talking about, SMS, getting the technology, getting it right. We've got an incredible, setup at the WMJ, who's the technical center in Atlantic City. The work there, but it doesn't mean we take any of that for granted. I absolutely agree on ensuring that our funding is consistent, and thank you, Faye, for that, because it is our ability to collectively work together, right? Which is why we say, let's have good conversation. Let's have uncomfortable conversation and figure out, what are the pain points. And yet I want to bring us back again to the immediacy, right? Part of this challenge today was, what are we seeing here recently, just sort of year to date? I know the chair spoke about some events last year. There's an immediate piece here, which I think, lots of us have kind of talked about, and in terms of where we go. I tell you, we within the agency really appreciate the work and the efforts and the input of the global community, because not only does it keep us as honest brokers, but it helps all of us do this job and continue to move forward where we need to. So I couldn't agree with you more.
Thanks. Billy, it's noon. Do you want to start wrapping it up, or do you have
I
questions?
think this last one here, we've talked a lot, and if everyone sort of think about what we've said today, I'd like to get sort of closing thoughts from each of our panelists. And when you think about what's important to your community of interest, I know you've already talked about some of them. You've talked about what are the things that we can collectively do to assist the FAA, not only in our ability to identify first. Our goal is to move to fully predictive. I mean fully. I'd love to get to a point where you say, you know what, this becomes an academic exercise. But today is not. It is not an academic exercise. 6 near misses. Right? I just want to press the point. 6 near misses. Any one. So we have taken these 6 near misses and treated it as if they had happened. And that's why we're here today, and that's really what makes us a resilient system. So, Faye, why don't we start with you? We'll go around and just closing thoughts on what you see, what you hope to take away, not only from today, but from your constituency. What are the steps that we truly can do now and in the near term? And I know we're going to explore that more in the breakout sessions.
I think that's a perfect tee up, because I really do think this is a start. And you said it's not an academic. It's not an academic program. And this is something that we really have to take back and meaningfully embed. I think we should see strong participation, not just in the breakout sessions. We should be meeting again. We should be bringing teams together again, from the bottom to the top to the bottom, ensuring that the frontline workers are connecting with their safety executives and the top of the airlines and throughout the industry, and collaborating and coming back and sharing what we've done before, and not just through SMS, but through the other data sharing programs that we have set up. I loved in your call to action, Administrator Nolan, when you said we were going to be leaning hard into ASIAS and that CAST would be tasked with this. Can't think of 2 better programs and organizations to help lead us forward, but there are others too. InfoShare, WATS, the World Airline Training Symposium. There are other places where we all come together to talk about some of these pressing issues, and I just would encourage all of us, and I think we're all very committed to this, participating fully and bringing our subject matter experts to participate fully and working as partners on these issues that we have started to identify and will keep identifying and moving forward.
Thank you very much.
And collaboration. We have got to have strong communication, coordination, engagement. Safety is an industry responsibility, an FAA responsibility. Certainly the legislature, the public, all of us need to be working together, because having a safe, efficient, diverse air transportation system, it's important for our economy, it's important for our point in the global environment. We need to be leaders, and we're only going to be able to lead if we understand each other and we work together on that common goal. We've got to be safe. We've got to be perceived to be safe.
Thank you, sir. Rich?
Yeah, collaboration is key. Our greatest talent is our people. Our greatest resource is our workforce industry-wide. When we get together and we can work on the issues, and you said it in your opening, if you take those 6 dots and put it on paper, they're easy to identify, but they're dwarfed by the safety record of the system. On a day-to-day basis, we provide the safest, most efficient airspace, complex airspace in the world, and we should be proud of that. And we can continue that. We have discussions every day. ATO and NAC has discussions every day. And we have a robust safety team that works on these issues. This isn't a one-off. This isn't a result or a response to this. It's a day-to-day basis that talented individuals that we rely on are working towards solutions for everything. It's come and will come.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Todd.
Yeah. I'd say at any given moment there are dozens of issues that kind of create a white noise around the ecosystem. And what we have to always keep in mind is we have to focus on safety. We cannot be tempted or lured away by the siren song of some other issue. Safety has to be the number one issue that we always have, and then try and manage around those other issues. If we don't have a system, banking system, there's a lot of conversation about the banking system these days. The banking system is predicated on confidence, and our system, our aviation system, is predicated on confidence. We have to make sure that the traveling public understands that our system is the safest in the world and feels confident getting on and off those planes every day.
Thank you, sir.
All right, Bryson, I know that we're going to get another update from you in about an
but I
hour.
will
All
repeat
good
a little bit.
information.
We do have the best system in the world. Everybody works hard at it.
Thank you.
We
Live in
need to
Austin,
keep it
Bryson
that way,
Berry. We appreciate
and we
your
can't
support.
rely on the past
And we do have
for our
extended coverage
future.
on
I think we need to bring a sense of
clicktohouston.com.
urgency at all levels, to staffing, to funding, to convey to the public that, really, you're safer getting on an airplane than you are walking out your front door. I mean, statistically, by far. And that's something that I think we can all work together on. I like Faye's notion of collaboration and the dedication of the employees. If I could be permitted one anecdote, I was on a flight a couple weeks ago that was delayed 2 hours, and that was because somebody found a screw that had come loose. And the maintenance people had to get there, they had to fix it, they had to make a report on it. The pilot was great about explaining all this to everybody sitting on the plane, and then the paperwork had to be cleared to make sure it was right. There's a lot of redundancy in that. That's why we are. We have to keep the urgency to that every day.
Thank you, sir.
Jason could say you had to screw this. I'm going to pay for that later, aren't I? So now
You think I was talking about you?
there you go.
Here's our storm system starting to move on.
Yeah, obviously safety, right? We are. This is not meant to bring everybody down. We're at the safest point in history, but we have to be vigilant. We've heard a lot of good words, buzzwords here. It starts with not, allowing any changes or lowering of standards. We need to figure out how we enhance safety. And as we get into these breakouts and our subject matter experts dive into this, I think that we have an excellent group here, and there's no sacred cows. We're going to look at this stuff and figure out if there is something that we can do, we're going to do it. And I encourage, thank you again for this. Let's continue the dialogue and keep this as an ongoing thing, because obviously, we've talked a lot here about what's going on and all the new people, and this is good.
Thank you very much. So Brad Mims, our Deputy Administrator, is making his way to the stage here.
No, go ahead. I want to wrap up by asking you a question.
Okay, very good.
For some sweater weather as we
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, you never know what's coming out of my mouth. So, Billy, I appreciate that you said it's not an academic exercise, and I think people want to know how committed are you and the FAA?
Thanks, Justin. We'll check back in with you in a little bit.
How committed are you for taking the information that we're gleaning today and trying to further improve our system?
Well, let me just say, on behalf of the 45,000 men and women, professionals who make up the FAA, we are as committed as any federal agency gets. We're considered by all accounts to be one of the most admired agencies in the federal government. And it's because we wake up every morning. I'm usually to the office about 6 o'clock every morning, and it's because we wake up every day and recognize that the work we do is the work of ensuring first the safety and then the efficiency of our national airspace system, never taking it for granted, and realize there's a lot to be learned. We appreciate the officers, the chorus of support around ensuring that we have the funding, that we're moving forward. I take to heart, quick anecdote, Nick shared, I was going up the elevator this morning, a couple of folks, one of an abortion.
One lady had been an FAA for 42 years. Another gentleman had been there 37. They said, wow, really appreciate the work you're doing. Hopefully you're representing us well. We are here, first and foremost as partners, and first and second as servants, to deliver for the flying public. We are absolutely committed to it.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And with that, could we just give a round of applause to these really great guys?
Before we move on, I just want to say again, thank you, Billy, and thank you, Chairman.
At this point in time, it's really unclear.
It doesn't sound like
it's
on. Okay.
Judge will be issuing his decision.
But I would have to say that I'm encouraged by the conversations we just heard. Thanks to our panelists, NTSB Chair Harmony, and of course Secretary Buttigieg, who was here earlier this morning for participating in the Safety Summit and for bringing us together. This whole group, this whole distinguished group here today. So, I once saw a sign on the shop floor at a major airline that read, "Safety's no accident," and that really stuck with me. And I think it sums up what we are seeing here today.
But the Texas
now,
Senate voted
I had the
Tuesday
privilege,
to
and I grew up with a lot of
upgrade
you
it
here in
back
this
to a felony.
industry.
Now the bill heads to the
I had
lower
the privilege
chamber
of
for
serving in the
consideration.
Clinton
Under the new
administration in the
change,
90s
if a person is found
when
guilty of
the
illegal
commercial
voting,
aviation
they could
safety
face
teams were
20
formed.
years in prison
It was
and more than a
and when it was first
$10,000
conceived.
fine.
And Administrator David Henson had a lot to do with that. He was an early advocate of robust data sharing and voluntary safety reporting culture. The initial conversations were very difficult, to say the least. But it was a very different time in aviation safety, and we knew we had to do something to improve safety. Cash really did change the game. Data sharing and analysis and voluntary safety reporting programs helped us to cut risk by 83% over the first 20 years, and we have cut it even further each year so far. There are no questions that today's safety record is a result of the difficult, intentional work that thousands of safety professionals, many of whom are in this room. Your attendance show how seriously this industry takes safety, and I applaud you for it. So now we get to the important part. We have to break for lunch. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, our aviation participants will convene in their breakout rooms to discuss concrete actions that we might take to enhance safety even further. For those of you who will be participating in the afternoon sessions, the MITRE cafeteria is open and staffed, or you can find some place of your choosing nearby. We will resume our meetings promptly at 1:30. To the news media and others, we truly appreciate your attendance this morning, because we want the afternoon sessions to be as fruitful as possible. The breakout sessions will be available only to aviation industry participants. The FAA's Office of Communications will provide a readout at the end of today that summarizes the overall direction of the conversations, as well as any other updates that we might be able to provide. Billy indicated earlier that this is only the beginning of what we expect to be an ongoing conversation, and we look forward to keeping you and the American people informed. I just want to take one point of privilege here and thank all of those from the FAA and other organizations who helped put this program together this morning, and who will continue to do what we need to do to address the whole issue of aviation safety as we move forward. So thank you for attending this morning.
Coming up, we are talking about the rodeo. One of our favorite topics. We have just a couple of days left, and now Machine Gun Kelly, he's already taken the stage last night. Up next, we are looking at his performance and how many people paid to watch it.
Plus, a born and raised Texan has earned a spot on The Voice. I was watching it. I was so excited. Up next, we'll let you know what team he joined.
And a look at your temperatures right now. Meteorologist Justin Stapleton is tracking the roller coaster temperatures. Next, how much rain the cold front will bring.
The Food and Drug Administration is updating the fact sheet for the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine. It now includes a new warning about the risk of myocarditis or pericarditis after use. Myocarditis is swelling of the heart, while pericarditis is swelling of the sac-like tissue that surrounds the heart. The FDA says these side effects have been reported in some people, usually within the first 8 days after vaccination. The agency says the risk is low.
Meantime, the FDA says kids between the age of 6 months and 4 years old are now eligible for a booster dose of the updated bivalent vaccine. It applies only to kids who got 3 doses of the original vaccine before December. That original vaccine protected against the strain of the coronavirus that circulated at the beginning of the pandemic. Now, this new version, which came out in the fall, also protects against the Omicron, BA4, and BA5 subvariants. Last night, singer Machine Gun Kelly took the rotating stage for the first time.
And MGK is best known for his songs My Ex's Best Friend, Bad Things, I Think I'm Okay. Check it out.
Used to have a soul until I threw it away. There's shadows on the wall, wish I would've ran. Gotta get away, I hope you understand. Trying to hide my face like a wanted man.
Okay, sounds like it was a fun time. 54,809 people paid to go and watch him on the rotating stage. Fun times.
And taking the stage tonight for the first time in 7 years, country star Kenny Chesney Coincidentally, this is also his 7th appearance. And as we are in the last days of the rodeo, you know, it's been pretty good weather this rodeo season.
Been pretty good. It's not too bad, that's for sure. You know what Haley's ready for tonight as well. She's ready for a little gun show with Kenny Chesney.
I love it. A little cringy when you say it that way.
No, he's the best. He is so good. He's such an entertainer.
Yeah, classic. Like really going back to like the rodeo roots. By
he's pretty good. Yeah, he's pretty good. But yeah, no, I love Machine Gun Kelly. I think he's super talented. So good for him to be here as well. Yeah, you know, it was interesting because we started rodeo and it was just blazing hot. It was crazy, right?
It was good.
Well,
you never know what rodeo's going to bring, but you know it's either like hot
and we're going to do that too. Basically, just pick a season for the last weekend.
Oh my gosh!
Choose which season you want to go.
Choose your fighter is basically what we like to say. So we'll be mid-70s out there today, and then I think tomorrow you're going to have to keep in mind this 50% could be some scattered showers throughout the afternoon. So if you're going out on the grounds early, especially go see my brother from another mother there, Mr. Chris Stapleton, should be okay, but do be ready. There could be some strong storms as you get out of the concert. I'm going to show you the timing here in just a second. And then, of course, Friday will be chilly. Same thing for Brad Paisley, and then wrapping things up with Mr. Luke Bryan as well. Right now, it's a gorgeous day today. This is going to be one of the better days that we've had of the week so far. We've got anywhere from the upper 50s to mid-60s. Galveston, League City, swing on over towards Columbus. They're sitting at around 62 right now. Down in Galveston, folks enjoying the beach. As we said, the rip current's been on the high side for a good chunk of the week, so just be careful if you're out there. Notice that the whitecaps, and we got a lot of that surf crashing in pretty hard right on the shore there, so that's the case. No wind gusts right now. That's the good news. East wind at around 16 and 66 with mostly sunny skies. Of course, yesterday we were watching this nor'easter that's now over towards Halifax. You can see it swirling right here. So the backside of that finally getting a bit of a break, but they got anywhere from almost a foot to a foot and a half of snow in inland areas in parts of New York, Albany, for example. New York City got picked up some pretty decent snow as well. And then, of course, here's our storm system. This is a piece of that atmospheric river that was blasting into California yesterday. It's now working its way in through Phoenix. You can see it from there up to Flagstaff around the Grand Canyon. And then this is going to work its way over to us. So quiet day today. If you've got preps around the house you need to get taken care of, do it, because we'll see this front through here late tomorrow night into early Friday morning. And once that clears, that's when the cold air starts to move in as we get into both Saturday and into Sunday's forecast. So let's go hour by hour and give you a sense of what